Mizmor Mem Daled, the 44th Psalm, is one of the Psalms that Ibn Ezra tells us that he says, Haya Chacham b'Sfarad, there was a wise man in Sfarad. Many claim that this was Rabbi Yehuda Levi that he spoke about, who said, I can't read these. I can't read these Mizmorim. Now, that is written in his commentary to Mizmor Peitet, the 89th Psalm. But this is amongst those psalms which are not a song of celebration. They are not a contemplation of creation. They are not even a prayer, or maybe partially. They contemplate the difficult problem of tzaddik veralo, virasha vetovlo, a reality in which there are righteous people, innocent people, good people that are suffering, that are being murdered, and we're talking particularly as a retrospective of our history and a current events of our history. And at the same time railing at the fact that so many evildoers are thriving, are flourishing, and having this tremendous question. Chazal tell us that this was the question that Moshe Rabbeinu asked God, and he told him that there's no answer for him. And it is therefore indicated that the book of Job was written by Moshe Rabbeinu. Whether it was written or inspired by that question is not the issue here. What we have here is something that is authored not by David, but by Bnei Korach. And Bnei Korach are Levim that lived through the ages, and there's a series of Mizmorei Tehillim that the sons of Korach, the descendants of Korach, wrote, that were written at the time, apparently, of Churban Bayis Rishon. But even if it wasn't written then, there's no question that this was prophetic. I know that many modern critics would like to indicate that this must have been written many centuries later because the description is so horribly accurate. And if it's so horribly accurate, is there such a thing called prophecy? How can we say that? And certainly are we going to see prophecy in the book of Tehillim? But since Tehillim was written with Ruach HaKodesh, and since, sadly, not everything changes, and we think that things changes, but that, in fact, history repeats itself, and we have a certain notion that the history that we remembered, or that our parents remembered, was oh so very different from the history that occurred 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, this would belie it. You'll see that that was not the case. I've divided it into stanzas based on what most of the Meforshim tell us. Many divide it into 3. Nobody seems to disagree that the first part is verses 2 through 9. Verse 1 is, of course, nothing more than the title who the author is. It's not actually part of the Mizmor. There are some who disagree and want to put verse 18 as part of part 2, but nobody disagrees that there is a part 2. And what I've done is part 3, which many put down as 18 through 27, I have divided into 2 because you will see that there is a major change in tone. Namely, it's the last 4 verses that are a prayer, though a very angry prayer. A very angry prayer. And if you read Kiddush on Tisha B'Av, and of course if you go to shul and hear Eicha, you will see what inspired what. And you will hear echoes of all of this all along the ages. The first part already foreshadows what's coming by simply telling us, Elohim, God, you see he's addressing God here. באוזנינו שמענו, אבותינו סיפרו לנו. We heard it. Our forefathers told us. And the rest of it, of part one, is this wonderful idyll of when God was with us and things went our way and he performed marvelous miracles. And wasn't that grand when God's countenance shone upon us and we rose to become an independent people in our own countries, coming out of slavery and transforming the world. Marvelous, great. But already it's told us we were told, which means that these authors did not see it. I only heard about it. Our forefathers told us. We don't live it. And at that point comes the turning point. Verse 10, which describes the present, the very sad, very troubling present. אף זנחתנו ותחלימנו ולא תצא בצבאותינו. Some say that the word af here means not afilu, but the word af v'charon in anger. Be'af. Af znachtanu, you have abandoned us, you've humiliated us, and you didn't go out with our armies. Which means that whoever wrote this in that present was part of a battle in which there was clearly nothing but defeat. Tashivenu achor menitzar, you made us retreat from the enemy. Umesanenu shasulama, and those that hate us crushed us. And as a result of this battle that was lost, probably Churban Bayis, titnenu ketzon ma'achal, because you need to know that they fought back, but they lost. You handed us over as sheep to be eaten, ubagoyim zeritanu, and you cast us and scattered us amongst the nations. So you can already see what the present is. This Ben Korach is clearly somebody who lived through the Churban and is now writing this in Golus. Okay? And there he uses words that we are familiar with. You should know some of this. Titnenu kitzon lemachal, timkor amcha belohon, echoes of Eicha. You sold us for no price, like just want to get rid of us. Velo ribita b'mchirehem, and you didn't increase or demand a higher price. Tisimenu cherpa l'shchenenu, you made us as a source of derision to our neighbors. Lag vakeles, they could mock us, joke at us, all those around us. Similar to what you know al Naharot Bavel, Sham yashavnu gam bachinu, right? Where what did they say? If you remember, the Edomites were thrilled to help the Babylonians, and the Edomites are our cousins. You understand? And that's when, of course, later on, the Babylonians went and crushed the Edomites as well. So while it was useful, they used them, and then they turned on them. Tisimenu mashal bagoyim, you turned us into a parable, so that the Jew becomes the wandering Jew, or the word Jew itself is a curse word. Manod rosh baleumim, a source for those who need to nod their heads or turn their heads. Oy, 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 oy. Kol hayom klimati negdi, all the day long. And he will use that word all the day long in a minute. It means throughout history, this long, long day. My embarrassment is right in front of me. Uboshet panai kisitani, and shame has hidden my face. I'm embarrassed, overcome with shame. Mikol mecharef umegadef, to hear the sounds of those who curse me, call me names. Mipnei oyev umitnakem, because of the enemy and the avenger. And now comes the next line, which Rashi wants to put as part of part 2, and Radak and Ibn Ezra and Malbim and everybody else sticks in 3. Kol zot batanu, all this came to us. V'lo shchachanu cham, we did not forget you. V'lo shikarnu bibritecha, and we did not belie the covenant. We remained true to it. Lo nasog achor libenu, our hearts did not retreat from you. Vatet ashurenu mini onchecha, and our foot swerved off your path. And here is where we have incredible variations in the commentaries based on the ages of when they were written. Before I proceed any further, let me explain. During the days of, whether it was the Babylonians, we did not hear it, but during the Roman conquest of Israel, we did hear of tremendous acts of Kiddush HaShem. You know that from the liturgy of Yom Kippur, where you hear about Aseret Harugei Malchus. You know, of course, the story of Chanukah in the days of the Hashmonaim under the Syrian Greeks, in which they tried to compel us to A, stop circumcision, in which Shmiras Shabbos was illegal, in which they tried to force people to eat pork, and put Jupiter's statue into the Heichal. And you all know the story, and we've been through it, about Hannah and her 7 sons, all of whom are murdered, right? Rather than and given to bow down to the statue. Even the youngest of the children will not do so. And Hannah herself finally throws herself off the walls of Yerushalayim. So the concept of martyrdom occurs earlier. And in your source sheet, you look at number 1. And I only gave you one source from the Gemara. I have pages and pages that I could give you. Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, Ma'u dichtiv tzror hamor dodi li ben Shaddai yalin. What does it mean that my beloved is like a bundle of perfume? I make him sleep between my breasts. Who is saying this? He says, Knesset Yisrael says this to the Ribono Shel Olam. Though my life be distressed. And so he treats the word tzror hamor as a play on the word tzarot, v'mar. Remember when we learned Ruth, where she said, don't call me, Nomi said, don't call me Nomi, call me Mara. More, instead of just treating this as this mire, right? It's not that. He says, though tzror hamor dodili, my beloved is to me a collection of tzuras and bitterness. That's how he's treated me. Yet my love lies between my breasts. Do you understand how you could talk about God this way? And the incredible thing is, Chazal tell us that both in the Tanakh and in the Torah Shebe'al Peh, our sages, our great ones, did not pussyfoot. When they were angry with God, they said it when it made no sense. They didn't say Amen every time they were hit. They didn't accept all the Yisurim be'ahava. It's not true. They fought back if it made no sense. And if not for themselves, if they were willing to accept it upon themselves, they couldn't accept it when they saw it happening to innocent children, when they saw it happening to tzaddikim, to the elderly, to the women. That they could not accept. So even if they were willing to accept it for themselves, as Rabbi Akiva did, they railed against this when it was happening to others. What occurs then is that we already have a concept of dying al Kiddush HaShem, but not necessarily with a song on your lips at the time doing it. No one is going to take away from the horrific torture that occurred to Rabbi Yochanan ben Tradion as he was being burned alive. You understand? Nobody is going to take away from the fact that Rabbi Ishmael's face was skinned while he was alive. And the kind of torture that was committed by what was seen as the height of civilization, whether it was Babylonia, whether it was Rome, whether it was Greece, you understand? What they did was beyond words. And all of that for what? Initially it was supposed to be so that you would convert to their way of life or else. But afterwards, it was no longer that. It was just because you dare called yourself a Jew. That was sufficient. And then if you didn't call yourself, that was sufficient. What happens in the Pirushim of our Mizmor is indicative of when the Pirushim were actually written. So in order for us to understand the differences in the Pirushim, I must give you some background. When I talk about the Pirushim, I'm talking about the Rishonim. Rashi, Radak, Ibn Ezra, right? And then you're going to get some that are coming later. Those that you know, such as Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, Malbim, right, writing in the 19th, 18th century. And then betwixt in between, you have the Akedos Yitzchok writing in the 15th century, Ibn Shuib and the Ha'meiri being writing in the 15th and 16th century. You understand? You've got these people writing at these periods of time. What changes during these period of time is something unfortunate that many of us don't learn. It's been whitewashed. I don't know what your education was like, but I went to public school for part of my education. When I was in high school, we were allowed to take, they didn't have AP in those days. They did have college courses, and we had a professor from the University of Colorado in Boulder who taught us at North High School in Denver. And I signed up for a college course on medieval history. Not one word. Not one word. Not a paragraph. Not a thing about what was done to the Jews during this period of time. Not a word. Not a word. I'm told that hasn't changed. I'm told that hasn't changed at all. Yes, we've legislated that you have to teach about Holocaust even while there's Holocaust deniers. But that's just one event. And I know you're supposed to say that this event was never like it, nothing ever like it. That really, that's because you don't know anything about what happened in between. So let's talk about what was changed, what occurred. And approximately, and I'm going to give you very rough dates, okay? Between the years 800 and 1500 in the area of the Iberian Peninsula, we're talking now about Spain and Portugal, there's a series of wars going on between the Muslims that took over and the reconquest by Christendom to take over. And this affected the Jews depending on where they were at. Then something else threw into the mix. The Almohadim came in. The Almohadim are Shiites, in case you think that anything changed. And they came in and they were firmer than the previous Muslims that were already in Spain. Now they'd already gone through Algeria, and Morocco, where they forced Islam by the sword. And now they took over certain sections of Spain. When they took over, they figured that the peaceful coexistence that had been there for approximately 500 years, from the time of the Churban Bayis, right, and up until 1066, the Jews and the Muslims lived in quite a bit of harmony. They saw each other as monotheists, and Jews rose to positions of power with great education. And many of their writings, by the way, are written in Arabic in Hebrew letters. 1066, there's a series of pogroms that begin in Granada by the Almohadim that come from North Africa and are firmer. That begins to be matched by Christians who are fighting against the old Muslims and the new ones, and while they're at it, against the Jews. So the Jews are leaving certain parts of Spain and at this point are seeking shelter under the moderate Christians, not knowing at the time that they're actually moving from the frying pan directly into the fire. So then you have another major date that comes into your calendar 30 years later, 1096, the First Crusade. During the First Crusade, Yahadut Ashkenaz, when you're thinking Ashkenaz, you're thinking perhaps Eastern European. No. It's Alsace-Lorraine, Strasbourg, France. The seats of parts of Germany, parts of France, in which entire kehillas are rampaged and destroyed. What made this extremely difficult is that this is the place of the great yeshivot, founded by Rashi, Rashbam, Balayaturim. Those were completely wiped out. By Christian accounts, the Rhine River flowed red for weeks on end. Actual numbers of deaths, from the low of 3,000 to the high of 10,000. Officially, the church was opposed to it, officially. But the itinerant preachers that led the Crusaders on their way to Jerusalem, in fact, incited the peasants and told them, while we're taking care of infidels in the Far East, let's take care of them over here. So that's what happened at that stage of the game. Meanwhile, in France, in Spain, they're still living relatively safe under the Christians. But gradually their rights are whittled away. Now they have to wear a mark on them, depending on whether a special kind of a hat or a special kind of a label. They can no longer hold certain public positions, depending on the city that you're living in, until we have another wave of pogroms in 1391. In 1391, most people don't hear about it. You all know about what? 1492. You see, that's all. Yeah. It's a good thing that Columbus discovered America at that time. Otherwise, you wouldn't know that date either. 1391 is a major massacres in cities such as Barcelona. By now, by the way, Barcelona is Judenrein by now. And at this stage, Jews are forced to convert or be killed or be expelled, depending on how generous they were. Expulsion meant you have to leave your property behind. Killing meant that you could grab a hold of their property and their goods. There was good motivation to kill. And what most of you may not know is that while we've gloried the Jews of Tzofat, of Ashkenaz, for their willingness not only to die, but to shecht their children and to shecht one another with a brocha v'shem v'malchus and not fall into the hands of the Christians, and certainly to kill your children before they will forcibly be baptized. The Jews of Spain did not fare nearly as well. What most people don't tell you is that the vast majority converted and held on to their positions, but the vast majority of the conversos continued to practice Judaism in secret until things got really bad and the rest of Spain became Judenline 100 years later. So between 1391 and 1492, you have a series of expulsions in which those that understood what was happening picked up and left. Some left for North Africa, for Egypt, such as the Rambam. Some made it to other places in Europe. Others made it to certain port cities in Italy. If they had money, they could get in. Livorno, Pisa were controlled by the Medicis and not by the church. And as a result, Jews, if they were rich enough, could come in. And there, even if they had previously pretended to be Christians, immediately returned to Yiddishkeit. So what difference does it make when we're actually translating this? Let's look. When you look at verse 19, you see a tremendous difference. And I'll explain. Ibn Ezra, Radak, tell us, Lo nasog achor libenu, and the law of the first half of the verse qualifies also for the second half of the verse. It's actually a rule of grammar and syntax, right? That you can write, I did not buy apples, oranges, and peaches, nor, and you don't even have to say the word nor, right? And then if the second half, I would say, right, and cereal and milk and whatever. And the assumption is that not, in the beginning, follows for the rest of the verse. And that's the way they treat it. So that's exactly what he says. Ibn Ezra says, Lo misharet. The law serves not only for the first half of the verse, during which there is an atnachta, a pause, but also for the second, which would be a declaration. Our hearts did not turn back from you, nor did our footsteps go off your derech, off your path, the ways of your life. In other words, we remained faithful both in thought and mind and heart, as well as in action. But when did they live? Why would they say this? Well, it was not a problem, because Rashi was describing something that was happening in the Rhineland. And the truth is, our hearts did not turn away from you, nor did we change our behavior. That's not what occurred after 1391. And consequently, the later Sephardic commentators were a bit abashed and didn't know quite how to deal with this one. So in writings that you rarely read, such as Ibn Shu'ib or the Meiri, right? Because in your standard Mikra Dolot, you don't have those Pirushim. But you do have Malbim, and he follows their derech. And what does he tell us? Lo nasog libeinu, our hearts did not turn against you. והגם שלפעמים מפני כובד הגלות נטתה אשורנו. And even if sometimes, because of the hard hand of this diaspora, our feet went off the derech, ולא יכולנו לקיים המצוות כראוי, and we could not keep the mitzvahs as we should have. מכל מקום, in any event, בלבבנו היינו שלמים עם השם. In our hearts, we remained faithful to God. Making excuses. Making excuses. The Rambam, having known about gzerot that occurred, remember he's living in the 13th century before these events, already knew about anusim primarily anusim in the hands of the Almohadim in North Africa, came to Morocco on his way to Egypt, on his way to Eretz Israel, and there he paskened that we should take back these Jews who had been forcibly converted to Islam, because Islam at least is only one God, whereas Christianity was unquestionably polytheistic, and they can hack and chinik. 3 is not 1. Can't have it both ways. Never mind all of the little statues that they have all over the place, because it's not even 3 equals 1 in the Trinity. You've got this saint and that saint and Mary and what else, right? It's paganism. And so the Rambam paskin that they should take them into the shuls, they could marry them, they're Jews, even if they did whatever they did b'shas ma'aseh. That was what the psak was. Some of the writers, such as the students of the Ran, Rabbeinu Nissim of Gerondi, were furious because he was turned in by fellow Jews and was imprisoned for a number of months together with all of his students until they were finally released. So there were collaborators amongst the Jews and had to show that they were, right, more Catholic than the Pope. And so his approach was that he doesn't care whether they are converting just for show or for real. As far as he was concerned, they were damned, and he differentiated strongly between those who left behind all their goods and fled for their lives, those that certainly died for it, and those that gave in. Those that gave in, no matter how much the compulsion was. It then continues. Ki dikitanu bimkom tanim. I'm talking about the 20th verse. For you have pressed us down in the place of a tanim. Now, what's tanim? A tan is a jackal, howling jackal. And that sometimes means, according to some, a place of desolation, a place without civilization. Mitzudat David says, no, it's a play on the word tanim, and Ibn Ezra agrees. Taninim, reptiles. And so therefore he says, in a place of snakes. Referring particularly to, if you like, the malshinim, right? And you have it inside your Shmonesrei, don't you? Isn't there inside Shmonesrei a curse against those collaborators? Yeah. Right? Who are those malshinim? They're not Catholics, they're not Protestants. Ibn Ezra agrees that it's Taninim, but he says it's whales. And whales, as a result, Taninim, or if you like, other kinds of creatures of the deep, to indicate the depth. Mima makim, from the depths I call on you. Places that are dark and places where there is no moral law, where the big eat the little, where there is no kindness. And therefore, that's the place appropriate for fish. Vatechas aleinu tzalmavet. And we've been covered over by the shadow of death. comes Malbim and says Tanim is a euphemism for the cruelty of the big people that are in control. And Etzel Mavet, he says, Shehemitu otanu b'mitot mishunot, that they put us to death with atrocious ways of dying, torn on the rack, burned alive, right? Hung upside down until you're dead, crucifixion. Ve'inu otanu b'yisurim kashim kedei latzet min hadat. And they tortured us with horrific tortures to force us. Now, you don't need to have Jewish writings. Just look at the illustration that the church itself made. We just went to Italy. You can go to the various cities in Italy. You can go to Lucca. You can go to Pisa. You can go to Florence. And in every one of those, they have a museum of torture. Museum of torture. With artifacts left over from centuries of torture. This is the height of civilization, right? This is what we call the classical world. You did that. Im shachachnu shem Elokeinu v'nifros kapenu le'el zar. So now the question is, how do we read it? Rashi and Ibn Ezra say im is a oath. And what isn't written is the first part. May such and such happen to me if, and you don't say that. You're not allowed to say it. If we forgot the name of our God and we spread our palms out to an alien God. So that's the if, im, right? And that's the way they translate it. Comes Malbim and says, not im, but afilu im. Even if we forgot the name of God, and even if we spread our hands to another God. What our intention was, Halo Elokim yachkol zot. Only God can determine that. Only He can investigate this. Ki hu yodea talumot lev. He knows what's the secrets of my heart. Ki alecha horagnu kol hayom. For you, for your sake, because we have your name on us, we are killed all the day. Do you see the difference? We saw the word kol hayom, and I want you to see this carefully. Verse 9, Be'elokim hilalnu kol hayom. When the going was good, we praised HaShem all the living long day. Right? And now we are killed all the living long day. Nechshavnu ketzon tifcha. We've been considered, we're deemed as sheep to the slaughter. This is where it comes from. So I want you to look at the piyut that's in Tachanun. Most people don't bother with this. Certainly women don't say Tachanun much. That was written for Kehilot Ashkenaz. This is now, right, these are the people that died for God's sake. HaShem Elokei Yisrael. See it? Number 2. Shuv mecharon apcha v'hinachem al hara'a le'amcha. God, go back against your anger. Have mercy for your people. And you all know this because Mordechai ben David sings this. Habet mishamayim ure'ei. Look down from heaven and see, ki hayinu lag vakeles bagoim. And I highlighted all the words that come directly from מזמור מ"ד. נחשבנו כצאן לטבח יובל. We are deemed as sheep to the slaughter to be led. להרוג ולאבד ולמכה ולחרפה, to kill, to eradicate, to beat, to humiliate. ובכל זאת, and in spite of it all, שמך לא שכחנו, we did not forget your name. And now comes the part, נא אל תשכחנו. Now you don't forget us. קולנו תשמע ותחון, hear our voice, and have mercy, pardon. ואל תיטשנו ביד אויבינו למחות את שמנו. And don't leave us in the hands of our enemies so they can erase our name. You know the word yemach shemo? So that they can erase our name. זכור אשר נשבעת לאבותינו. Remember what you swore to our forefathers. ככוכבי השמיים ארבה את זרעכם. I will make your children, increase them as the stars of the heavens. ועתה נשארנו מעט מהרבה. And now there's just a few of us left from the many. ובכל זאת, and in spite of it all, שמך לא שכחנו, נא אל תשכחנו. Well, then later on, by the way, this thing was written in, this comes from the Shevet Yehuda, written by Reb Shlomo Ibn Virga, regarding the expulsion of Spain. Among the expulsion not from Spain, but a few years later, just 3 years later, 4 years later, I apologize, 1496 was the expulsion from Portugal. And from Portugal came Don Yitzchak Abarbanel. This is also written in the introduction to Abarbanel's Pirush for the book of Yeshayahu, which he wrote in Venezia, in Venice. And you can, for those of you that have a hard time, the English is there. Shamati mipi zkenim yotzei Sfarad. Ibn Virga is at this point made it earlier to Italy. I heard of among the elders that came out of Spain. Ki onia achat ba'a ba'makat hadever. Now let me give you an example why. You see, those that had a little bit of money, such as Donna Grazia, Nasi, and other families that were well-to-do, or that could swallow a couple of diamonds or what, got out. They had to get on ships and get out. You need to understand that they were given precious little time, 30 days to leave. The shipmasters demanded a lot of money. People who couldn't get that went on rickety boats wherever they could. Crowding as many people as they could on the boat, it was needless to say there was no sanitation, there was no fresh water. Without sanitation and fresh water, it didn't take long before typhus and other diseases spread. The dead were thrown into the sea. Sometimes the people were stripped of whatever they had and thrown into the sea alive to drown by pirates. Such happened here. Baba makata dever, a plague broke out on the ship. Ubala aniyah hishlicham el hayabasha mekom she'en yishuv, and he threw them off to some little island in the middle of the Mediterranean that was not inhabited. V'sham metu rubam berav, and most of them died there of hunger. V'ktatam nitamtzu lalechet leraglam ad yimtzeu yishuv, and some of them managed to walk until they could find some kind of a human settlement. There was a Jew amongst them. He and his 2 sons, they started walking. This woman was not used to this kind of marching. She fainted, she swooned, and she died. And the man carried the 2 children until he passed out, and his children died of hunger. When he woke up from his swoon, he found his 2 sons dead. rose up to his feet and said, Ribono Olamim, Master of the universe, הרבה אתה עושה שעזוב דתי. You've done an awful lot that I should leave my religion. תדע נאמנה שעל כורחם של יושבי שמיים. I want you to know that in spite of all those that live up in heaven, יהודי אני ויהודי אהיה. I am a Jew and I will be a Jew. ולא יועיל כל מה שהבאת. And anything that you brought upon me won't do you 1 ounce of good. And he took dust and grass, soil, covered the boys, and continued on his way to a settlement. This story is, as I said, written not only in this particular book, but it is also written in Abarbanel, in which he wants to describe the agony of his people, and he tells this story. Comes Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, and you need to understand that he's writing this in the 19th century. He's writing this when Jews have received emancipation, in which German Jews saw themselves as full citizens, right? And could you foresee what would happen? And what did he say? מזמור זה מביע את רעיונותיו והרגשותיו של ישראל בגלות. This mizmor is about the feelings and the experiences of Jews in diaspora. ויש בו בפרק הזה, and in this chapter, there are verses 10 through 23. קווים שאין אנו מוצאים אותם אלא בגלות שלאחר חורבן בית שני. There are events here that we did not find except after the destruction of the second temple. It did not occur in the destruction of the first temple. ואף כאלה השייכים בייחוד לשליש האחרון של הגלות הזאת. And most of the events described here can only be attributed to the last third of this golus in which we are. So he is talking about the last third. If you're talking about from 70 to, let's say, 1900, right? He means the last 300 years. Really? ומגיעים עד לעבר הקרוב ואפילו להווה. And I don't know if he knew what he was saying. He says, and the description is appropriate not only for the previous centuries, but for the very close past, and perhaps even for our present. Knowing, of course, that biblical critics try to indicate that this must have been written at a later age, but they knew that the Bible had been canonized by Anshe Knesset Agdolah, right, way before the destruction of Bayit Sheni. How is it possible that we can go and say that this was, when was this written? And of course, they don't believe in prophecy. He says, where do they push it off to? Well, the school of biblical critics say this must have been written by somebody in Babylonia. He says they can't say this about this mizmor unless he says they're so convinced that they have to. He says, da'ah brura u'bilti mishuchedet. If they were clear thinking and not already prejudiced, they couldn't possibly say that. He says, however, b'mishorerenu pa'ama ruach Elokim. There was the Holy Spirit, the Ribono Shel Olam's Ruach HaKodesh was in the heart of our poet. And therefore, he could see other eras, other periods, far beyond his lifetime, and feel them. He says, and leave for us a legacy, a spiritual legacy that describes our agony throughout the ages. Pretty incredible. So how does he end it? Ora, lama tishan ad Hashem. Wake up, why do you sleep, my lord? Hakitza al tiznach lanetzach. Awaken, shake yourself up. Don't abandon us forever. Lama panecha tastir, why do you hide your face? Tishkach onyenu v'lachatzenu. Forget our oppression, the suffering. Ki shacha la'afar nafshenu, for our souls have been brought down, prostrate to the ground. Davka la'aretz bitnenu, our bellies are cleaved to the ground, as somebody who's fainting, ready to die. Kuma ezrata lanu, rise up to help us. Ufdenu leman chasdecha, and redeem us for the sake of your name. You must do this. Ad kan. Nothing changed, did it? So you will look and see on your, as you read the Kinot, and you will hear the echoes of Mizmor Mem Daled over and over and over again. Ki alecha horagnu kol hayom. May I point out to you that there's a major difference in the martyrdom of Rabbi Akiva, the martyrdom of the Jews of the Rhineland, to the martyrdom of Jews in the Shoah, for the following reason. Nobody tried to convert them in the Shoah, number one, right? And many of them that were killed had chosen to go to the other side. Many of them had already didn't consider themselves Jews. Their grandfather was maybe a Jew. And halachically they were not Jew, and it didn't make a difference. Who could have foreshadowed this? If you read Abarbanel, he will tell you, Alecha horagnu, even those that converted and gave in. Because in 1481, Torquemada established the Inquisition and went after all of these Jews that converted, right? Accusing the conversos, those that did and those that didn't, of practicing Judaism and hiding, burning at the stake, hundreds of them, and that followed them to the New World. There was an Inquisition in Brazil. There was an Inquisition in Mexico. There was an Inquisition in Argentina. The church continued to persecute them. And you still have today people who are anusim, direct line, and are still afraid, living in terror to this very age. It still goes on. Spain kicked out the Jews in 1492 and renewed the decree of expulsion in 1802. Now they're telling the Jews that want to come back, they'll give them citizenship. And sadly, there are many who are. Yeah. Yeah.
Was Christopher Columbus a Jew?
Most probably.
Okay.
Most probably. I found his, in our trip now, we had a tour guide who took us to the house where he lived in Genoa. And I didn't know this, but I learned something very new. His mother used to weave cloth for the sailors' clothing. That was her profession. That's what she did. That's why they're called jeans, because they come from Genoa. And you didn't know that. You thought that Levi Strauss came up with them. I didn't know that. You see, I learned something new. Most likely. Most likely. And that would also explain why he was in Italy. And there were quite a few conversos that made it to Italy and didn't were still afraid to go back to open practice, depending on where they were taken in. They did not have a problem in returning to Judaism. They were allowed to return to Judaism in the cities that the Medicis ruled, but not everywhere else.